Hi everyone, welcome to Anti-Anxiety Action Group Live. This group is all about supporting you guys to take positive action, small, consistent action in order to support yourselves and your time with anxiety, to reduce and control, reduce and eliminate anxiety. If you've got any questions or comments for our guest, please just put them in the comments below. Now, because we're using a different service called StreamYard, we won't see your name. So please excuse us if we don't say hello to you by name, but we will see your comments. So send any questions, send any comments that you've got as we go, and we'll keep an eye on that. This week, we're talking to Tate. Her and her husband John run Hypno-Tates and the Grief Bubble Facebook group, and she's going to talk to us today about grief and anxiety within grief and anxiety around grief. So let me get her on and we'll get started. So hi Kath, how are you?
Yeah. Nice to meet you all. Hi.
So Kath, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Tate and I live in Carlisle, and I run a hypnotherapy business with my husband, which we only started 3 years ago. We both got a daytime job, and unfortunately we had a tragedy in the family. My son was 19 and took his own life. So even though in the press you see that you should expect it, it was a total shock. So not only did we lose him, we had that grief, but we had the shock of it being sudden and having no idea. So we got plunged into this world that we never knew anything about or expected to be in. And it took us on a journey. We got treated, both of us, with hypnotherapy, which really affected us in a positive way. We both ended up with post-traumatic stress and had to have different treatment for that. And now I feel like we're coming out of the other side, and we want to use what we've learned to help other people and to raise awareness, really. Because I feel that there's a lot of things in the press about looking for all the signs, and sometimes there is no signs. And especially now in COVID, so many people are struggling with anxiety or with grief or anything around that. So it's a really good time to talk about it, because people don't talk about it. You feel embarrassed to talk about it, or you feel like you shouldn't talk about it, or you're expected to be better by now. So it's difficult. So.
Yeah. And what did you find? What did you find was the thing that caused you the most anxiety as you went through that journey with grief?
I think I didn't really suffer a lot from anxiety before, just the usual anxiety that people have when you're doing something new, or you're driving to a new place or in a new situation. But then all of a sudden, the whole world seemed terrifying. So even though nothing had changed, the world wasn't any more dangerous, everything was much more... like you were so much more aware of all the dangers. I have got another son who's younger, and I was terrified for him. So if he was 5 minutes late ringing me or didn't answer a message or anything, I got terrible separation anxiety, even from my husband. So if he was late, or any phone call that didn't get answered, or any of my family. So all of the things that had been ordinary before were suddenly really heightened. And I just really suffered. I didn't sleep, and I still don't sleep. So that's a problem for me. But I have a lot of anxiety about safety of the family, safety of people that I know. I have to try and keep away from the news at the moment, because I find myself that anxiety spiraling out of control quite quickly. Whereas before, I felt like I just suffered from ordinary anxiety, whereas now it is more of a problem for me that I have to take steps to address and control. So,
What steps have you found? Because there'll be lots and lots of people in similar boats. The story, of course, will be slightly different for everybody. But what are the steps that you found really help you to control anxiety?
Well, first of all, I learned, I discovered hypnotherapy. So that's been really good for me. I'm in the hypnotherapy world, and there's a lot of people that I can go to for help if I'm struggling with anything. So that's the main thing, which I can also use our experience to help other people. But my biggest thing is about that 5 minutes when the phone call hasn't been answered, or you're waiting to meet somebody and they're not there. So one of the biggest things for me is distraction techniques. So it's things like looking for 5 things that are red, or 5 things that you can smell, 5 things that you can taste, so 5 things that you can see, those sort of things. But I also just use the simple things like where you tap your fingers together like that while you're waiting.
It takes quite a lot of coordination, that, doesn't it? So you have to concentrate.
Yeah, but it distracts you enough from what you're thinking about. There's little things that I don't always do, but I do doing a figure of 8 on your forehead when I feel stressed out.
I'm a big fan of that one.
Yeah, so and tapping my wrists together, I tend to do that a bit, where people can't really see that, so you can just tap on your own wrist. Also holding your 2 fingers together, because that reduces the cortisol that comes from your kidneys. So if you just hold those 2 fingers together, they're things that you can do and people don't even know that you're doing them. So I've learned a few things that hopefully, obviously I've learned tapping, but you don't want to be tapping all over your face when people are there. So,
So when you're talking about tapping there, you're talking about emotional freedom technique, EFT, aren't you?
Yeah, where you tap on different points on your head and your face and your body, and that clears your energy. Well, whether you believe in energy or not, it definitely gives you something to concentrate on. So, it changes the feelings that you have about your anxiety. So I tend to use a combination of things all together, really. So it's difficult.
Now, the anxiety that I get around grief, there's a couple of things. When I am, or in the past, maybe not so much now, but in the past, when I have come across somebody who has lost someone else, especially if it's been really recent, I just don't know what to say to them, and that causes me quite a lot of anxiety. I don't know whether I should be mentioning it or not mentioning it. And I know everyone will be different, but from your point of view, what's the best thing that people can do in that situation?
I think it's difficult because some people mention it because they just want to know the facts, or just want a bit of gossip. So that's difficult. There's those people that you start avoiding, really, because you don't want to tell them what's going on. For me personally, I find it harder when people ignore it and don't mention it, because the more you ignore it, the bigger a thing it becomes, that it's never been mentioned. And then sometimes I feel awkward mentioning it because it's as if they've deliberately not mentioned it. But for me personally, and every single person's different, I find it easier for the people that just say, I don't really know what to say, Kath. I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you. I've no idea. I haven't spoke to you before because I was worried about upsetting you. I think there is that thing, people don't want to upset you, but you're already upset, so it doesn't make it any worse. So long as you're mindful of what you say and you don't say. I think it's the comments like they're in a better place and you must have known something and you knew they were going to die. All of those comments that just aren't helpful, really. No. I think in our society, there's not really a good way of talking about it. People don't talk about it. And then it becomes like people ask you if you were all right, and you've got to be careful of what you say to people because they don't really want to hear that you're not happy or that you're really suffering. There's this belief that grief runs in a line, that you get better as if you've been ill and suddenly you're going to get better. So after a certain period of time, you're expected to be okay. But I never realised until it happened to us that really that pain never goes away. It just lives alongside you, or you carry it with you when you find ways of living with it. But then a song comes on the radio and you're right back to that time. It takes you, just takes you by surprise, really, and things that you don't expect take you right back to that situation. So this idea that you've got a certain period of time and then all of a sudden you're going to be better and everything's okay and you should just get on with your life, that's really hard to struggle with. I struggle with that. And the fact that people don't talk about it, really. They say sorry for your loss, but it's not really a loss, is it? That person's died, but people don't say it. It's as if you've just mislaid them somewhere. There's not really any good ways to talk about it, I think. And people are scared to talk about it. Yeah. And then people, when you talk about it, take an intake of breath as if you shouldn't be talking about it. You know what I mean? So it's difficult, I think. But I think that's a society thing. Grief affects everybody, so why can we not talk about it in the same way? It's a bit like sex and money and politics, isn't it? You don't want to, you've got to be careful, haven't you? People don't find it easy, so...
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not going to get into a sex, money or politics conversation with you. I'd much rather talk about grief. that's the state of politics at the moment. I'd rather talk about grief.
Yeah.
But you're right, people don't talk about it, and there is a big there's a big stigma attached to it, especially when you've been in a similar situation to you where you've lost somebody through suicide.
Yeah, I think it's one of the worst things, because people say very unhelpful things as if you should have known something. And even in the press, we have about a lot of mental health awareness, but a lot of the awareness is centres around about looking for the signs and check on your friends. Matthew was a 19-year-old boy that to everybody, all of his friends, all of his family, it just seemed really happy. He was away at university. He had a good circle of friends. I think the problem lay with his girlfriend, but he hid that even from his friends. You know, he pretended that that relationship was healthy and okay, and underneath it was obviously quite controlling, and there was problems there. But I think even Matthew did actually have a counsellor at uni, so he was a lot more supported than other people. But I know people struggle to find the help that they need, you know, and especially now in COVID, you know, you're talking about 3-6 months waiting lists for anything. So, you know, people struggle, and to reach out for that help and then not have it available and have to wait such a long period of time for something like anxiety or grief. And the other thing with grief is that there's this feeling that you're not allowed to do anything for 6 months. So you can't get any help anywhere. You're supposed to grieve and get through it. But really, you could get to such a position that you really aren't in a good place. I did that thing that you're really, really busy every second of the day, so that you're filling that time with things at the time that you feel are important, but they're not really. And I basically nearly ran myself into the ground. I went to the doctors after 6 months because I hadn't had any sleep, like really, like maybe 2 hours sleep a night. And you really can't function on that. But my doctor was really good. I was lucky, but I know a lot of places do turn you away and feel like there's that 6 months period or whatever that somebody's in a textbook said. But every person's different. You could get to that stage a lot quicker than me, or a lot, you know, it depends what other circumstances you've got. I've got another child to look after. You know, I was still trying to work. I was only off work for 6 weeks. Because you kind of want to get back to normality, but it's not normal. It's never the same, but you do try. But I think another big thing is that thing about pretending that you're okay to people. So instead of being allowed to say, you know, people have said to me, why are you looking so miserable? I just think, have you even thought about what you've said to me? You know, it's difficult. So, but I just think there's that thing that it's not only losing that person, it changes every relationship, it changes you. I've discovered anxiety that I didn't have before. It was never really a part of my life. You know, it was manageable. And now I've had to find ways to manage it. And you kind of think for a while that you are losing your mind. You need to find that right support that you can get. I feel lucky that I managed to find it in my husband, but I think there's a lot of other people. I got sent for the standard CBT where you're supposed to talk about it all. But really in grief, that just means that you're reliving it. You know, you don't really want to talk about the circumstances necessarily. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of people, which is what led us to content-free hypnotherapy, where you don't have to discuss it all, and you can get help and release and support without having to go over and over. And I actually had EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, which again is something where you don't necessarily have to talk about it all, but they use stimulants on your brain. It's just like when you're pregnant, those TENS machines that you hold in your hand, there's little electric shocks. So it just buzzes from side to side while you're talking about it, and it reprograms your brain to put that traumatic event into a better place for you, so it's not always at the front of your mind. Yeah. So that really worked for me, but everybody's just got to find the thing that's good for them. Just simple things, I think, like being able to go for a walk, getting some exercise, even if it's the last thing you feel like, even if you just sit outside because you can't be bothered to walk, but being in the fresh air, that normality of being in the normal world instead of cutting yourself off and sitting in your house all the time, which is what you really want to do. You just want to hide from everybody and not speak to anybody, you know. So I think, and sensible things like looking after yourself, eating properly, they have such a big impact, especially if you live on your own. You've got nobody to make sure you are eating, or, you know, that care for yourself. And sometimes it feels wrong to care for yourself at that time, you know, you feel like that you shouldn't be happy and you shouldn't be healthy. You want to suffer yourself in some way, depending on what the circumstances are. And I think a lot of people, you know, especially now, people aren't going to be able to say goodbye properly, are they? So I think that's going to cause a lot of problems and anxiety and maybe even regret for people. So I think, I don't think it's an easy time. And I think there's a lot of things that you read as if you're supposed to get better, and it doesn't always work that way. It can be really difficult.
Yeah, you can. Now, unfortunately, I can't see who said it, but somebody who's watching, thank you for being there, has said that they totally agree about the grief time limit. So I think that's really an important point to get across to people, that there isn't a set timeline for grief.
One of these special things that I've seen a lot in the press is about the grief model that gets wheeled out quite a lot, and it's certain stages of grief that you're supposed to go through, as if it's in some line that you're going to, you know, as if you get better, you're going to do this first and then this first and then this. But I think in reality, what happens is everybody goes through all of those stages at different times, at different paces. And you may go to one stage, you may feel anger and then feel like you're getting a bit better, or you're feeling, and then come out the other side and then something else happens and you go right back to being angry again, or being, you know, some days just to get up, to get dressed and have a shower and get out of the house or to speak to people is overwhelming. And until you've actually been in that position, you know, I used to think that I was quite a strong person and quite, you know, used to deal with life quite well. I've had quite a lot of things happen. I was quite a strong person, and then this happened, and I just totally, I used to cry every day when I drove to work over Eden Bridges because all of the children all dress the same and look the same. And so I used to cry every day on the way to work and every day on the way home from work. And no matter what I did, there's no other way to get over the bridge, really, is there? You know, so it's quite a long way around to try and avoid it.
Bypass, wouldn't you know?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I have avoided people. I've avoided people because they've deliberately on purpose wanted to know loads of, you know, they've never bothered before, so why are they wanting to know everything? So I think that's difficult. I think until it's happened to you, you don't realise that not only have you lost that person, you've changed every relationship with everybody in your life, but also not only have you lost the person at that time, you lose them for every event all the way through your life. So even something as simple as Christmas, that person's not there for Christmas. So it changes that way that you deal with it. And then for us, all of Matthew's friends are moving on with their life. They're moving in with the girlfriends and buying a house and finishing uni. And all of those stages are stages that we'll never go through with Matthew. So there's that feeling of loss to do with that as well. So this is why you don't just get over it in 6 months or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, because all the way through your life, and even when you're in a position where you should be having a really good time, like we went to New York a couple of years ago, it spoils that in a way, because you feel you want to tell that person about it and they're not there, but also you would like to share it with that person. So grief isn't just about losing that person about that time, it's all the way through your life that gets repeated, that missing person, that space at the table, the things that you want to do. You know, we've had a bit of talk in the family about what it would have been like if Matthew had been at home in COVID, because his brother's been on his own, which a lot of people have got the brothers and sisters, which can bring good things and bad things, obviously. But I think, you know, Jack struggled. I do struggle about worrying about Jack. That's a big anxiety I have, because you get these booklets from the police when it happens, and you read through them, and there's like one sentence that sticks in your mind. And for me, it was the one that it can be, if anyone in your family has killed themselves, it raises your risk by about 75%. But if it's a child or a brother, it's nearly as high as it's like higher than that, I think, you know, really, really high.
Not a very useful stat to have, is it?
So you kind of think about things and you worry that, you know, and I think for me as well, the way that Matthew died, the fact that you didn't see any signs. So obviously that's a massive anxiety for me with Jack, because Matthew used to be a child that did talk about stuff. We had a good relationship, and it was only after he died I found that just this part of his life with his girlfriend, he's kept, you know, we'd known about it before, but then it wasn't a healthy relationship, and he decided to go back but not tell us, I think, because he didn't want to worry us. So that's very difficult. I worry that, you know, Jack will get to that age where he stops telling me things and you don't know what's going on. So, but I think with all anxiety, you have to find a way to manage it for you. So what works for one person, and it's the same with grief. I think in grief, there's a way that people feel you should go through certain stages and do this, and you shouldn't be doing that at that stage or whatever, or everybody else is doing this, or all my family are way further on than me. But everybody's got their own way of doing it, whatever's right for you. You know, if you want to go and see the grave every week, if that was what suits you, that's fine. If you never want to go, if you do something else, whatever is right for you. I think it's really hard not to look at what everyone else is telling you. A lot of people have got things to say, but really it's your grief and it's your way. And even in your own family, people do it differently. You know,
I mean, it can be it can go the other way. So you can also go, so as you're saying, it can last as long as it lasts. So, you know, you're not necessarily good in 6 months or 2 years or 3 years. It can go the other way, and that can cause anxiety as well, where actually you kind of feel like you're okay-ish again quite quickly. And that can cause anxiety for people as well, you know, thinking, oh, I'm not doing this right.
I think it depends under the circumstances and the relationship you had, because, for instance, if somebody's been ill for a long period of time and you're expecting that death, you feel that shouldn't be a shock, but there is still a shock. You know, my granddad was ill for quite a long time and then died. But the fact that they're suddenly no longer there, I think that can come as a shock to people. And even if somebody's got a long-term illness, such as cancer, but there's also that guilt. I think people don't tell you about the guilt of grief, the guilt about, you know, I should have been to see my granddad more, or, you know, I've been looking after this person for a certain period of time while they've been poorly, and now it's a relief because I can get back to my life. But then you feel guilt about that, you know. Obviously, in our situation, it was like, did you miss things? How could you not know? You're supposed to be his mother, you know, all of those things. And I think there's a lot of expectations by other people of what people say things without realising. They think they're being helpful, but really they're not, you know, or they say things like, oh, you're looking good today, Caroline, you know, and then suddenly remind you, you know, so the next subject is, oh, didn't your granddad die or something? And then all of a sudden you feel bad that you are trying to get on with your life. But I think a lot of people put on a show, don't they, to pretend to be okay, but really underneath, you know. But it's just whatever works for you, really, with anxiety and grief. Just don't listen to what everybody else says. It's your own journey, you know, and whatever's in the press, that's fine. There's a good book by Megan Devine called It's Okay Not to Be Okay. And it's kind of opposite to all of the other grief books, where she says, yeah, if you want to feel awful, that's great. If you want to go and scream at everybody, you know, whatever suits you, whatever feels right for you. And I think that's really important. She also has a website, actually, and she has a Facebook group. So they're kind of opposite to what everyone else tells you, but I think they're much more realistic, really, about, you know, you changing relationships and how things are. So,
talking of Facebook groups, you run a Facebook group as well, don't you? The Grief Bubble.
Yeah, that's right. It's called the Grief Bubble with the Hypno-Tates. It is a private group, so that if you make comments in there, it's only within the group that people can see it. But it is open to anybody to join who's affected by grief. So we'll just share experiences, really, or you don't even have to be an active member. You can just go and see what's going on. Do lives most weeks, and there's just information. There's other people in the same situation as well. So there's different people in different circumstances, so you might find other people that have had a similar sort of loss to you, or are feeling the same, or at a similar stage to you in their journey. So it's just really a place for people to come and talk about it, and just not to feel alone, because I think that's a big thing. People don't want to talk about it, and even in your own family, sometimes you don't want to upset other people who maybe are at a different stage, or you feel like they must be sick of you going on about it. So, which they're not really, but they're going through their own journey, and it may bring up things for them if you're always talking about it. So I think it's good to have a place. You know, yes, some people do know each other, and some people have just made friends within the group. You know, it's just a place to contact people, and people from there as well are also welcome to private message me and John if you don't want to do a question in there that we could raise for you, but you don't have to know it's from you, you know, so that if you don't want to be... if you don't want everybody to know what your question was or what you're asking, that's fine. You can do it another way. So, but yeah, so
comment. You'll put the link for the group in the comments of this video, won't you? So
I will do, yeah.
If anyone wants to get support from Kath and the Hypno-Tates, so it's Kath and John at the Hypno-Tates,
Yes.
probably the easiest thing to do is go join their Facebook group, the Grief Bubble, and you'll put your website, and will you put your website and stuff in the comments as well?
Yeah, that's right. We've got a website page as well, Hypno-Tates Hypnotherapy. We've got a Facebook page of that name. We do have a man. My husband is also trained. He's actually working tonight, otherwise he would have come on with us. But so it gives people a choice as well, because some people would rather talk to a man, or some people would rather talk to a woman, or if needed, we can both talk to them together, depending on what your circumstances are. You know, if it's a family or a couple or anything like that, or we could just speak to individuals, whichever's best for those people involved, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, Kath will put all of her details in the comments so that you can get in contact with her if you need to, or if you'd like to. And if you have any questions, Kath, is it okay if they put any questions that come up while they're watching this video on replay in the comments, and you'll just keep an eye on it? Yeah,
of course it is. I did put the link on the actual advert for tonight, so it was there before if people are wanting it before I managed to get off. So, yeah.
But yeah, keep an eye on for the Kath will put those details on for you. Kath, thank you very much. It's been so interesting to talk to you, and I know so many people are in a similar situation, so yeah, just knowing that they're not on their own.
If you've raised any questions for anybody, if they wanted to get in touch with us, they can get my details off you if they don't want to do it directly. You know, I will put my contact details in afterwards. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Caroline.
So, Kath, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much. I'm just going to take you off the screen. So that was Kath from the Hypno-Tates, and it's just so interesting to talk about grief. As she said, it's not something we talk about often enough. So any questions for Kath, either pop them in the comments or go over to her group. Next week I'm talking to Jay. Jay is the host of Chatterday Live, and Chatterday Live is an online chat show. It goes live mostly on a Saturday morning. He supports and raises awareness for all kinds of mental health. And it was actually when I appeared on his show that gave me the inspiration and the confidence to start doing this show. If show is not a bit too much, which it probably is. But yeah, so next Tuesday at 7, we're talking to Jay. And if you have any questions, any comments, or want any support from me, get in touch anytime at all, and I'll be here. Speak to you next week. Bye for now.